have author, Minnesota local boy Nick Campanella back today. He's written a new book and he's going to speak about a nonfiction work about his own life and a transformation he's been through on a journey to health, decisions he's made that have transformed his life, and it can work for you too. Very simple things that he's doing to get healthy, to improve himself. The new book, Nick Campanella is the author. It's available on Amazon.com. You can pre order it for 99 cents. And why don't you look at Nick Campanella? He has an author page over there. Head over there to Amazon.com, look for Nick Campanella, follow the author. You can see his mystery works, his works of fiction are there as well. But see the new book, Incrementalism. Nick, how you doing today, and what's going on with this new book, and how did it change your life? What's going on, Nick?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks again for having me for, I think this is our fifth interview in 4 years. So I appreciate it greatly. And I appreciate all your viewers and all the people from my end that are watching as well. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, we got this new book popping out February 18th on my 46th birthday. We're going to have another $1 ebook bomb that will explode on Amazon. I can't wait. But as you said, it is available right now for pre-order for 99 cents. And yeah, I just can't wait to get this book out there and get people reading it. It's called Incrementalism, a baby step guide to health and wellness. And as you know, I'm a fiction author. I write crime thrillers. My mind is crime thrillers is where my mind is, and I tell people that health is where my heart is. And I just want a little change of pace. And I think I've killed 250,000 people. I'm sorry, 250 million people in my books. My second book was about World War III, and so I've all of my books are kind of violent in nature, and I just want to change the pace. I want to bring forth peace and unity, and I want to help people.
And healing too. In this process of
Definitely.
healing and working on oneself to be the best you can be, what these baby steps you talk about to improve one's life, I find that I've climbed that stairway myself and have gone from, I think I peaked out about at 324 pounds, and I'm down this morning to 254.6. Weight loss is really possible for people if they apply some of these techniques. Weight loss and healthy diet is just one of those. What are the journeys what worked for you? I know what worked for me. Ironically, I went on the same sort of path, and it really works. You just cut out the fast food, you remove the toxins, went through the kitchen, I removed the carbohydrates. I wasn't really ever addicted to soda pop, but sugar's a bad one. I like sugar in the raw, but unrefined sugar is much more higher quality sugar, and I go for cane sugar too sometimes if it's available. But what are these simple things people can do to make themselves healthier?
Well, yeah, everybody knows that the best path to health and wellness is to, like you said, remove the toxins from your body. Everything you're consuming, the alcohol, the drugs, the cigarettes, pop, chips, fast food. So everybody knows that, but the question is, how do you do it? And with this book, it kind of explains how I did it. And I'm 46 years old. I partied pretty hard in my 20s and my 30s. I was, trying to become a writer and trying to figure out a way to get healthy and to, get myself sober and run the right on the right path. So how I did it, the simplest thing I can tell you is with quitting smoking, for instance. I was never a heavy smoker, but let's just say I smoked 10 cigarettes a day. I looked in the mirror and I told myself, why do you need 10 cigarettes? Why can't you smoke 9 cigarettes? So then I tried that and I did that for a couple of days, no problem. Then you pop down to eight and then seven. Why can't I smoke 6 cigarettes a day? And you just kind of the baby steps. It's incrementalism. See, governments throughout the history of mankind have been using incrementalism to. It's the psychological warfare on the populations. So why can't you use psychological warfare on yourself? That's why I named the book Incrementalism, because you're kind of tricking yourself. I'm sure everybody's heard of the the rat or the mouse that, or I'm sorry, the frog in boiling water. You know, if you throw a frog into boiling water, it will hop right out. But if you put it in lukewarm water and you turn that water up slowly, that frog will probably perish
Yeah.
slowly. You know, so you got to trick yourself in a way. You know, and it goes for cigarettes, with alcohol, drugs, with fast food, with weight loss, with exercise. All of those things, you know, are a lot of people give up. You know, if their doctor says, "Oh my God, you got to change your diet or you're going to perish," and people they start and they just end up quitting. What I found for me is the best way is to take baby steps and do it slow and kind of work at your own pace. There's no pressure, you know. I mean, you just gotta go with each day at a time, you know. And so, yeah, like you said, if you want to lose weight, you might not need the skinny shot. You know, you might just need to look in the mirror, consider what you're consuming. If you're eating fast food three, four, five times a week, or you're eating frozen pizza all the time, or if you're eating microwave meals, or if you know, you're just not eating with a balanced diet, you don't have no fruits and vegetables, you might want to take a consideration on changing your diet slowly but surely. You don't need fast food three, four times a week. You could set yourself up with two times a week and then switch down to one. And same thing for pop. I used to get my headaches every day, so I needed Coke every day. I needed the caffeine. So I was drinking like two cans a day, and then you know you realize that that's actually that high fructose corn syrup is actually quite toxic. You know, so you want to get that out of your life. But you might have a hard time quitting drinking pop day one, but you could, you know, cut down to one pop a day, one pop every other day. I tried Coke Mini. That was how I kind of started to get myself off of drinking the addiction of pop. And yeah, now I drink bubbly, you know, and it tastes kind of like pop, but it's just water. It's just, you know, 0 calories or whatnot. But yeah, it's a difficult step. So that's kind of why I wrote this book. I want it to be simple for people. It took me 20 years to get myself sober, to quit smoking, to quit eating junk food and fake food and pop and everything. And you know, I think if people read this book, they could probably transform their life in less than 1 year, and you know, they'll see the results. You know, you don't need the skinny shot if you have a
Will save a
balanced
lot of
diet.
money and
Yeah.
to save a lot of money too.
Well,
Uh,
and I know several people that have used the skinny shot and it works, but I also hear the horror stories of the side effects that they have. And then what are you stuck dependent on the shot for the rest of your life? I mean, you know, I mean, maybe you could, you know, use the skinny shot and then eventually, you know, there's no silver bullet to losing weight. So, I mean, at some point, you know, if you want to get off the skinny shot, you're going to have to take a look at your diet and you know maybe exercise just a little bit, you know. And it's easier said than done, but you know it can be done, and it does work, you know. And it's not just for appearance, you know, this is also for short-term and long-term health, you know. um a lot of this stuff that we have that we're consuming is actually toxic and can cause cancer, and it can cause other problems, and it can, you know, weaken your immune system so you're sick. I tell people that, you know, one of the reasons why I wrote this book is because I think I have a unique story. And since in my 20s, I mentioned I partied and drank and smoked a lot. And, you know, I was sick all the time. I was always getting pneumonia at least once or twice a year. I was getting bronchitis at least two, three times a year. And I was always sniffling. I was coughing. I was sick. I was calling in sick from work. I was hungover, you know. But guess what? You know, in these 7 years where I've fundamentally transformed my life, I have not missed a day of work. And I work in the mental health field. I'm around sick people all the time. I'm in doctor appointments with people sick almost every single day, and yet I don't get sick. I don't get a cold. I don't get the flu. I've never had a flu shot. I never had COVID. I never had a COVID shot either. And that can't be a coincidence. You know, it has to be, you know, I must have built up my immune system over these last, you know, definitely 7 years that, you know, you remove the alcohol from your life, you remove the cigarettes from your life, you remove the pop and the fast food and all this stuff from your life, and you exercise and have a balanced diet with fruits and vegetables. I mean, you got armor to protect yourself against all these illnesses out there.
your natural immunity begins to kick in, and you'll find that you get, more refreshment from taking a drink of water like you just did than from grabbing a monster drink. And monster drinks really are harmful. Of course, we're not doctors, we're not giving out doctorly medical advice, but still people ought to recognize the things that society's pushing on us in the shelves, the foodstuffs that don't go bad aren't good for you, but the foods that are good for you will always go bad. So try to have things in your kitchen that will go bad. And that's better. I have more fruit in my kitchen and less canned stuff and fewer things that are dried carbohydrate and more healthy choices on hand that I can grab, and more supplements that are healthier too. But we're not selling any of that necessarily. Fortunately, I was released from cigarettes and I was released from alcohol consumption over a year ago, and I find it to be um, great. Also, the kind of a little bit of bullying too is good for me. It brings out the best in me if somebody's noticing that I'm fat. So kind of being teased a little bit for being kind of chubby got me to look at myself and say, you know what, I have chunked up. I didn't get fat until I was 44, but when I got fat, I really laid it on. And when a guy's metabolism starts to slow down, those extra calories you take in that you don't need, those wasteful calories start to chunk on your body, and you can't eat the way you could when you were a teenage boy and you're, in your 20s. You just don't digest it the same way, and then you store it, and you really don't need that extra blanket, that layer of material that just goes to your gut and your butt. You got to get rid of that, you know. Um, so how did you quit? Like, alcohol is a real stumbling block for a lot of people, and our society pushes good times, and they is supposedly synonymous drinking, drinking alcohol, but people are walking away from it this year. We're noticing polls that the liquor stores are having trouble with their sales, which is an interesting indicator that maybe there's a correlation between, hope or people's optimism and drinking. But how did you lift yourself out of things like tobacco and alcohol to realize, maybe you can be healthier, eliminate the toxins, have a good time without that artificial good time of drinking? You just want to be a better person and be healthier and stronger, right? Or what was it?
Well,
What was the
definitely, and
motivator?
the
Yeah.
incrementalism, the incremental steps helped a lot. But for me, I kind of was fortunate to, I had a child, a daughter, when I was 28, and I wanted to be the best role model that I could be. So I did want to change my lifestyle. I wanted to, I wanted to never be drunk in front of her, and I just wanted to be a good dad. And that wasn't really a problem. So my child's never seen me drunk, and I I can guarantee that will never happen. But um, in order to fully, I quit the blackout drinking. I quit the alcohol. I wasn't quite the alcoholic anymore, but I'd get bored. So on Friday night, I'd still want to go and hang out, play pool, drink some beers with my friends and stuff. But so the daughter helped me to slow down. But what helped me, you kind of need a hobby. And so for me, writing actually helped me big time because on a Friday night, instead of going boozing, I just sit home and type. And so that helped too. But still, I'd still get bored. And I'd still, if it was a birthday or a wedding or something, I'd still kind of, have a few. But so, use that incrementalism and just get in a situation where, like, why do I need to drink on the weekends? Why do I need to drink on my birthday? Why can't I just have fun? Like, this is fun for me. I don't need alcohol. You got to have other things to do and sober, like-minded, positive friends to help influence you in the right direction. But it definitely does help to, have a hobby. But and same thing for cigarettes. And I mentioned earlier that, you just kind of count the number of cigarettes that you smoke, and you smoke one less every day or every week until you get down to that last cigarette. And when I've been doing this incrementalism for the last 7 years, trying to quit smoking. It was no problem for me, but I couldn't fully get rid of the cigarettes. And for me, even when I was down to that last one cigarette a day or a couple cigarettes on the weekend, the only thing that really fully was able to help me to quit smoking cigarette is I ended up having this. this health issue that I'm still kind of battling. It's been since April of last year that was my last cigarette, and the doctor calls it silent heartburn, and it's not like I don't have the acid reflux that a lot of people feel. I don't feel the burning or the regurgitation. What happens is like my throat is just kind of hard to swallow, not like food or water, but just saliva. Just while I'm sitting here talking, sometimes it's kind of just hard to swallow, and my voice will get a little dry sometimes. And so I've been dealing with that since April, and it got to the point where I physically couldn't have a cigarette. So I tell people that, use incrementalism, cut down your cigarettes to the least amount possible. But then when you do get a cold or a flu or bronchitis or something, you can't smoke, use that as an opportunity to just let it go, because cigarettes are not useful to you. They're toxic. They're more toxic than we even know. In the 50s, I think the experts, and that goes back to a couple of minutes ago, you had mentioned that we're not doctors, we're not offering medical advice, we're not experts. But the thing is that the experts have been wrong. In the 50s, they told people that cigarettes were just fine. And in the
Mhm.
70s, they told people alcohol was just fine. Then they told people that microwaves were just fine and that fast food was just fine. And and recently they say, oh, the vaccines are just fine. Go get your booster, and it turns out the experts were always wrong. So I think it's time to start listening to people that aren't experts, and and listen to people that like me, that obviously I'm not a doctor, but I'm giving you real life results, and I'm not lying. You can ask my boss. I mean, I've had doctor's appointments where I had to miss work, but I have not called in sick to work in 7 years, maybe even longer than that. But I've been at this company for 7 years, and I'm just always here. And I attribute that to the fact that I have removed the toxins from my body and from my life, and I'm happier, I'm healthier, I have more money in my pocket. And we didn't mention that either. That when you drink and you smoke, I mean, you're spending extra couple, three, $400 a month that you don't need, that you can put towards your family or say anything that you want. And I just think it's a beneficial to remove that stuff from your life, and not to mention fast food and pop too. I mean, how much do people spend on pop? That seems like an innocent number, but I mean, I bet people are spending more than they want to spend. And you get rid of that, that's extra money in your pocket. Drink some water. Embrace the suffering of water.
I love water. A gallon a day is really good for me to really push the water down and keep it flowing through the body. It washes out the inside. Think of how much water we spend on the body's largest organ is the skin. Uh, we ought to be cleansing our insides as well and helping the body to wash out the interior as well, because there's a lot more on the inside that needs to be cleansed. And having a good water source and making sure your water's clean enough and doesn't have those microplastics that we now know are bad for our thinking and bad for other things related to men's health. There's a lot of things that, like you mentioned, that society pushed cigarettes in the 50s. Doctors were saying, Chesterfields are, doctors recommend this or that brand of cigarettes, and they'd be paid money to the studies, whoever paid for the research, Philip Morris or whatnot, whichever corporation paid for the study would show that, they covered up for years that there was no causation related to cancer from cigarettes. And all of that was a ruse. And then alcohol in the 60s and 70s. Of course, marijuana was in there too, and other drugs that are now back in vogue. Ironically, we've got these things legalized. It seems like it's hard to keep away from the issue of government sort of wanting to have weakened and poorer folks, because when people are addicted to these substances or even fast food, addicted to things that are unhealthy, addicted to toxins, they're going to be poorer and weaker and less self-sufficient and less able to take care of themselves and less likely to be living properly. That's the ultimate goal at the top of your ladder, is to have, to be living properly. And that's on the front cover of your book, Incrementalism, that that's going to be impossible if you're all loaded up with toxins and you can't fully function, isn't it? Isn't it a way of keeping folks under an opiate of control, and you've got to get that back for yourself. And more podcasters are recognizing that too, that to be self-sufficient, you've got to be healthy. You got to take care of yourself first a little bit. Hmm. It just
Definitely. And there's he calls himself a script doctor called John Truby. I get a lot of information from him about writing. And he says that every story is about a character that wants something and the obstacles that get in his or her way, and how that character changes in order to get what he wants. And part of that is in the beginning of the story, he's living improperly, he's living a lie. And at the end of the story, he's living properly and he's living in the truth. And you can attribute that to yourself too. You can look in the mirror and be like, well, what do I want? You got to set reasonable, reachable goals. And you got to, understand and don't be afraid to understand that, you might not be living properly, but you want to have the goal, especially if you have kids, to at one point in the future to live properly. And how do you live properly? And that's kind of what this book, Incrementalism, is about. How do you live properly? What is the proper way to live? And I have nothing against anybody if they are still drinking and doing drugs and smoking. That's it's just like you said, it's baked into society. But I'm just trying to help people because there is people out there that they do want to they do want to live better. They do want to live more properly. They do want to fundamentally transform their life. I know many smokers that want to quit smoking, but they just can't because they feel like they need it. But no, you don't. You want it. You don't need it. And same thing for alcohol. When I was a drinker, everything was boring. Nothing was fun. If you watch the Vikings game, you got to be drunk. If you go out and play pool or softball or anything, you got to be drinking to have fun. But once you get sober and once you've had several months or a year or so without drinking, like you don't need the alcohol to have fun.